Welcome to the All Out Leadership Podcast, hosted by Pastor Eric Lawson, where each episode is uniquely designed to help you live all out by bringing you practical leadership from a biblical perspective delivered in 10 minutes or less. So whether you're a business leader, serving in ministry, or simply looking to grow in your leadership, this podcast is for you. Before we dive into this week's topic, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and download the show notes at ericlawson.com/podcast. And while you're at it, feel free to share the content on social media. Now, let's join Pastor Eric for this week's conversation.
Welcome to another edition of the All Out Leadership Podcast. Today we're going to be unpacking the value everyone. Everyone matters to God, therefore everyone matters to us. So whether you're a leader or not, this should be a Christian value that we all have because everybody matters to God. When you look at the body, and Paul talks about how we're all parts of the body of Christ, Paul says that the visible parts already get their own amount of honor, their recognition, but the invisible parts are actually more valuable, so to speak, because I can live without a finger. I can, might not have the best looking face, but I'm not going to go very far without a liver, a kidney, and a heart. And so there are parts of the body of Christ that maybe they're not quite as visible, but that doesn't make them any less valuable. And we live in a culture today that celebrates the visible, that celebrates the charismatic personality. And it's important that as Christians, we don't lose sight of the fact that just because somebody isn't on a platform, that because somebody isn't having a microphone in their hand, or they're not super dynamic, doesn't mean they're not valuable to God, valuable to the body of Christ. And so it's important that we just understand everyone matters to God. Therefore, everyone should matter to us. In fact, Jesus even says in one of the parables that he tells, he said this, as you've done it to the least of these, you did it to me. And then he follows up with, as you didn't do it to the least of these, you didn't do it for me. So I don't treat Jesus any better than I treat the least person that comes across my path. Proverbs 19 verse 6 says, many entreat the favor of the nobility. Every man is a friend to one who gives gifts. All the brothers of the poor hate him. How much more do his friends go far from him? He may pursue them with words, yet they abandoned him. And that really describes so much of our culture that has a bias towards beautiful people or affluent people, and we kind of just brush off maybe people who we don't think can do something for us. I love this statement. Jesus uses things and loves people. We tend to love things and use people. I'm going to say that again. Jesus uses things and he loves people. And we tend to love things and we use people. So Jesus just goes, things are available for me to help serve people. And we tend to go, I use people to serve me so I can get the things that I want. And that's a bias that's unbiblical. It's ungodly. In fact, years ago, I was teaching my staff a message on just this subject, and I took the word bias and I broke it into an acronym, and I think it's just helpful. Bias is beautiful, influential, affluent, successful. And there are just certain people who you'll find they're always gravitating to beautiful people, influential people, affluent people, successful people, and they kind of brush off maybe the nobodies or the people who maybe aren't wealthy or not necessarily beautiful and kind of brush them aside. That's not how Jesus worked. Jesus stopped to touch the leper. Jesus dealt with people whom society would throw out as outcasts. And if we're to truly look like Jesus, we need to have that same spirit inside of our life. Here's a great story that I'm going to share from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 4, verse 35. On the same day, when evening had come, he said to them, let us cross over to the other side. So why is Jesus wanting to go across the other side? Now, this is a very long journey. It wasn't just a little stream they were crossing. It's the Sea of Galilee. This is big. In fact, on the way there, they encounter a large storm. The disciples think that their boat is going to sink. They put a lot of effort and energy in getting to the other side. So was it because there were some rich famous politician, some influential person, some large donor to his ministry that he had to go across and endure all that challenge to get there. Well, let's see who Jesus met on the other side. Mark 5, verse 1. And they came to the other side of the sea, the country of the Gadarenes, and when he had come out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one could bind him, not even with chains, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains. The chains had been pulled apart and the shackles broken in pieces. Neither could anyone tame him. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying out and cutting himself with stones. And that's who Jesus had to take the whole night with his disciples to go across to the other side to meet. It was a demoniac who had long hair, long fingernails, and was crazy. And Jesus said, we got to go serve that guy. I love Jesus. No matter how crazy you are, no matter how many issues you have going on in your life and where you're living, Jesus says, you matter to me. I'm going to come to you. And so what we see is Jesus delivers this man, sets this man free, and the town freaks out, and they come out and they tell Jesus to go to leave. And so here's what we see, Mark 5:21. And now when he had crossed over again by boat to the other side, a great multitude gathered to him. Jesus literally took all night to get to the other side to minister to one man who was demon possessed. So there's hope for your mother-in-law. So I love Jesus because everybody matters to him. And I just look at all this effort that he put into reaching the one. So if you're on our team here at Element Church, whether you're staff, whether you're a volunteer, everyone matters. So let me just kind of break this practically down. Every phone call matters. Everybody that takes the time to pick up a phone and call us with a question, a comment, even a criticism, they all matter. Every email, every time somebody takes the time to write, to type an email and send it to us with questions, prayer requests, whatever it is, feedback, it matters. And because they took the time to write, they deserve a response. Every question matters and it deserves an answer. Now, I've been asked a lot of questions I don't have answers to, and I just say, hey, that's a great question. I'm not sure. Let me get an answer and I'll get back to you. Every person who gives us feedback, that feedback matters. And often there's always a kernel of truth. Even maybe it wasn't packaged well. Maybe it was very hurtful in how it was packaged, but I still want to look for the kernel of truth inside of that. Why? Because the person on the other side of that feedback matters. Everyone who walks through the door of any one of our campuses, they matter. Everybody who's online watching matters. Everyone who hasn't shown up matters. Remember Jesus? He leaves the 99 to go find the one that hasn't shown up. Why? Because that one mattered. And everybody who leaves the church, they still matter. And so I just pray that our culture, that our heart here at Element Church, when anybody has any type of contact with us, whether they choose to join our church or not, they would go, hey, that is a loving group of people, and I feel that I mattered to them. Everyone matters to God. Let's make sure everyone matters to us.
Thank you for joining us on the All Out Leadership Podcast. We hope you gained new biblical insight that challenged you to grow in your leadership. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, we would love your help in getting the content out farther. You can help by subscribing to the podcast at ericlawson.com/podcast and telling others about it. Next week, Pastor Eric will be back with another episode. So until then, we hope you have a great week being an all-out leader.